My name is Lowell Nave. Woodblock printing is what I do, and that's what this film is about. Most of my woodblock prints start from a drawing. The sketch I am making now will serve as a guide for later work, to refresh my memory and to check on details. This is my studio in the woods of Vermont. For me, it's an ideal place to work. I have plenty of space, and there are no distractions. From the original drawing, I've already made a working sketch the size of the finished print, with all the color areas outlined. From this large sketch, I trace several of the color areas onto a piece of white pine. The pencil must be used very lightly so that it will not scar the wood. When the drawing has been transferred, the first block is ready for cutting. Like all wood blocks, this is the reverse of the original drawing, because the image on the block is always reversed in printing. The short-bladed knives must be sharp, and the job requires accuracy and patience. The knife is always held at an angle to make a beveled cut. Channels like these can then be lifted out easily, and the beveled cut ensures that the remaining wood has a solid base. When the block is printed, these will show up as white lines, framing the door of the barn. The cuts must be deep, so that the negative areas will not pick up ink when the block is printed. A few more hours of cutting and block number 1 is almost ready for printing. This is the edge of the roof. Large areas of wood are removed with a wide scoop. Not all of the background needs to be cut away, but inking the block will be easier if there's plenty of free space around each area to be inked. These are finely ground pigments. Most printmakers use ready-made inks, but I prefer to mix my own. The colors are richer and more permanent. The dry pigment is mixed with raw linseed oil. I use an ordinary sheet of glass as a palette. Finally, lacquetine is added to give the ink body and to prevent it from bleeding out on the paper. The ink is the right consistency when it snaps under the brayer. One of the things I enjoy most about this work is watching patterns jump out of the wood when the ink hits them for the first time. The brayer must be kept well charged so that all parts of the block will have an even coating of ink. Several colors can go on the same block so long as the various color areas are separated. Two colors side by side in the same block would be almost impossible to ink. The size of the brayer is determined by the size of the areas to be inked. For very small areas, no brayer at all. To ensure proper register, I use these wooden strips nailed to the corner of the table. They hold the block firmly in place and serve as a guide for positioning the paper. The paper must be thin but tough. Rice paper is best. To get a good impression, all the printed surfaces must be rubbed. For this, I use a rounded wooden paddle with a smooth, waxed surface. The color shows right through the back of the paper. With the rubbing completed, the first print can be checked. I may want to change it later, but now I'll go on to the second block. It's the same size as the first one and fits into the same spot on the registry press. After coating the block with a layer of glue, I attach the print from the first block face down, making sure it's in the same position as before. The glue holds it firmly in place, and it serves as a guide for cutting the second block. I can tell exactly where to put the new color areas so they'll be placed properly in relation to the colors in the first block. I draw in the areas to be cut, again being careful to use the pencil very lightly. The paper is left in place. After the cutting is completed, I'll soak it off with water. Carving seems to be something natural to a man. Time was, people would sit around for hours just whittling on a stick and figured that was amusement enough for anyone. They don't do it much anymore. Maybe they ought to. This color is for the sky. Another color for a silo. And a third for a stone foundation. This is the second print. It's a combined picture, blocks 1 and 2, printed on the same paper. For the third block, I use a piece of old weathered wood. This will give texture to the boards in the barn and lend interest to the leaden, wintry sky. Weathered grain like this gives the whole print a feeling of woodiness, something which sets woodblocks apart from lithographs and other forms of reproduction. Now I cut a final block for accents, such as the hinges on the barn doors. When all the blocks have been cut and printed, it's time to check the results and see what changes are necessary. A print is put together piece by piece, one color added at a time. But they are seen together, and they must work together. Then I look it over to see what changes it needs. When the print is dried, I can draw on it directly to indicate the changes. To start with, that sky needs some variation. Shafts of light will help. Stays got left off the silo. Foreground needs a dark band to balance that top-heavy sky. A tree would help to liven up this corner. Another door here, I think. Hatch in the silo, too. Darker color for some of the other doors. Yes, take those out. And a bird. That'll help break up the sky, too. The additions can all be made on existing blocks, since the large background areas weren't cut away. The shafts of light in the sky are made by varying the pressure of the rubbing. Heavy pressure for the dark areas, less pressure for the light areas. The finished prints are hung up to dry. When I've printed an edition of 100, I'll destroy the blocks. The final result is different from my original conception. Like all works of art, a print is a fluid thing, evolving and changing as it progresses. Here are some of my other prints. Sometimes people ask me, why all the carving and inking and bother? Why wood blocks? Well, because nothing else prints the way wood does. Look at that woody texture, the spontaneous feel of the grain. That is why wood blocks. Signed, Lowell Nave.